The Syracuse Orange have just landed a verbal commitment from what will become the highest rated recruit in their program's history. Fran Brown just put the rest of the ACC on notice.
You are Locked On ACC, your daily podcast on the Atlantic Coast Conference. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Kenton, I remember when, Fran Brown first took the Syracuse job, and everybody who knows him, everybody who covered him had said, just watch out, Fran Brown on the recruiting trail. You do not want to go head to head with that guy. And again, recruiting is not as easy in Syracuse as it is in, a couple of other ACC schools, let alone the SEC, the Big Ten. Fran Brown, he's making history right now with that program. Thank you so much, everyone, for making Locked On ACC your first listen and your first watch. We're available free wherever you get your podcasts. We're free on YouTube. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. He is Kenton Gibbs from Locked On Wolfpack. I am Alex Donno from Locked On Canes, and today's episode is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code Locked On College for $20 off your first purchase. We're going to talk on this episode about this stunner that Fran Brown and Syracuse just pulled off with Calvin Russell. And we're also going to talk about, I always smile when I see Super League in the headlines again, how Florida State and Clemson could end up leaving the ACC to join a football Super League. I need this in my life. But for more on what Syracuse is doing, obviously, the person we had to bring on, and he's with us now, is Jackson Holzer, who does a fantastic job hosting Locked On Syracuse here on the Locked On Network. Now, first things first, Jackson, with Calvin Russell, and I know this well covering Miami, and by the way, I was not expecting Miami to land him heading into announcement day. It was a weird recruitment, but I also felt that Russell really kind of threw people off the Syracuse scent over the final weeks, because Syracuse had buzz weeks ago and months ago. And then LSU seemed to have a lot of buzz, but then right before the announcement, Michigan had all the buzz. I mean, do you get the sense that maybe Russell wanted to keep people guessing leading up to his announcement?
Totally. And honestly, so here's the backstory of Calvin Russell, okay? This is someone that Syracuse has been eyeing for over a year. They were one of the first teams that were sticking out in the recruitment of Calvin Russell. It was for a long time, Syracuse and Miami. And I had someone ask me this over on YouTube, and I answered the question for them. And they were like, hey, was Calvin Russell an under the radar guy a year ago that Syracuse got in on, and all of a sudden he shot up in the rankings and there was this feeling of loyalty with them? No. Calvin Russell was a 5-star a year ago. Everyone knew who Calvin Russell was. Everyone offered him, at least. To what degree every school showed interest, I don't know, but he had the pick of a litter to choose from. Everyone pretty much offered him, and it seemed like it was going Syracuse's way. It really did. I mean, he was in attendance for the Syracuse-Miami game at the end of the regular season. That was a big win for Syracuse over Miami specifically, because those seemed like the two front runners at the time. He also goes to the Syracuse spring game over plenty of other schools. And so that kind of raised everyone's antenna, thinking like, oh, this is actually real. This Syracuse and Calvin Russell stuff is not a joke. Like, he's really considering Syracuse. So you got to figure at that point, you're going to get an official visit with him, right? Wrong.
Yes.
They did not get an official visit with him over the summer. He visited everywhere else. And yet he still chose Syracuse. So my theory, because I don't know, but my theory, and based on how it played out, was he had unofficially visited Syracuse 4 times. He knew the campus. He knew Fran Brown. He knew the relationship. And he set a bar. And Syracuse was the bar. And everyone was guessing. Nobody really seemed to realize, because he's taking official visits elsewhere. And yet Syracuse is always kind of just hanging around in that recruitment. And then you get to decision day. And I'm not going to lie to you. Like, I didn't want to get my hopes up too much, But you know how when Michigan, they tend to get a big recruit, all of a sudden you see their coaches, post eyeball emojis and everything like that, like a couple hours before some big announcement Michigan's involved in. I was refreshing Twitter the whole day on that Saturday. Crickets, nothing from the coaches. There was articles out there from insiders saying Michigan, but I'm like, where's the coaches' eyeballs? Normally they know at least a few hours beforehand. And then he picks Syracuse, and it's the biggest Syracuse recruiting win literally in my entire life. Not since 2001 have they gotten a commit.
Hey, ever? So there was one bigger than that, like on paper, of course.
No, literally not since 2001. Johnny Moran is the last Syracuse recruit to be rated at the level of Calvin Russell or maybe even higher. I think he's slightly higher rated if you go look at the all-time commits on 24/7 Sports, but that's how long it's been. So this is a pretty big deal for Syracuse football.
So in terms of this commitment and what has happened here with Fran Brown, does this finally put to bed the notion that he was one of those coaches that was born on third base a little bit in terms of, oh, he's a great recruiter at Georgia. Oh, the guys that he got out of the portal last class, they were hidden gems. People weren't that high on Ohio State's quarterback after last year. We were all saying Kyle McCord, are we sure about him? Meeks, another guy. People weren't clawing and screaming and saying, we got to fall over ourselves to go get that. He's bad, dude. But this is a situation, like you said, a 5-star through and through. 6'6", 190 pounds in high school. He's got an NFL body already. And this is a guy that Fran Brown goes out there and gets. So do you think, in your opinion, this puts to bed that idea that Fran Brown he's a good recruiter. He does fine. This cements him as like, hey, he's one of them ones, as the kids would say, in terms of recruiting.
I think it was already put to bed for Syracuse fans. I think the expectations had already been elevated, but around the country, this cements him as, okay, you can't just look at Syracuse on the recruiting trail anymore and say, it's just Syracuse. We got nothing to worry about. We're some big powerhouse program. We're the University of Michigan. We're the University of Oregon. We're the Florida Gators. We're the Georgia Bulldogs. We're going to win out for this recruit because we're going up against Syracuse, and we're going to make this recruit not say no to us. You can't do that anymore, no matter who the recruit actually is, because you had one of the top players in the country say, you know what? I'm from Miami. Miami is in my backyard. I am not even going to put them in my top 4. My other top 3 are going to be 3 power programs, like traditional power programs. And yet I am still going to commit to Syracuse University without taking an official visit. He had already elevated Syracuse recruiting, but maybe not in the way people realized. It was a little bit more subtle, because Syracuse football recruiting up until Fran Brown was one of, if not the worst recruiting schools in the power conferences. Seriously, they were among the worst teams in recruiting basically every year for power conferences, consistently ranked outside the top 50 on every major recruiting services year in and year out. Fran Brown takes over, and from day one, he elevates Syracuse to kind of a middle of the pack recruiting team. It took his first class, he does it, middle of the pack recruiting. So already Syracuse fans have a different expectation for Fran Brown now, because he's earned that. He has elevated Syracuse football recruiting, and now he gets Calvin Russell. Now they have a top 20 class in 2026. I got to tell you, I was optimistic about the Fran Brown hire. I did not see him getting a top 20 class at this point of the game in 2026. I didn't see it coming.
Here's what I want to break down, what we want to break down with Jackson on the other side. And, Kenton, you mentioned Calvin Russell, 5-star receiver, how big and tall he is. This is not only a football recruitment. He's going to play 2 sports at Syracuse. We have to talk about the basketball angle as well. You want to keep it locked right here. We got Jackson Holzer with us, Kenton Gibbs and Alex Donno on this new episode of Locked On ACC. You want to keep it locked. Folks, the only ticket app that Kenton and I use is Gametime. And why would I use anyone else? I've been using Gametime exclusively for the last 2 years because I'm getting the best features, the best technology, the best prices, especially at the last minute. I'm a procrastinator, so Gametime is the app for me. If you ever decided at the last minute to head to a ball game with friends or family, I do it all the time. Maybe it's game day. You suddenly realize you want to be in the stands. That's exactly where Gametime comes in. It's the easiest way to grab last-minute tickets without the stress. With the money you save on tickets, you can splurge on food, drinks, merch, even invite a bigger group to come with you. Gametime makes it possible. Gametime makes buying tickets fast and simple. Prices on the app actually drop the closer you get to the first pitch, and they've got incredible last-minute deals, clear seat views, I should say, and a lowest price guarantee that takes the worry out of buying. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off. Download the Gametime app today. Last-minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Thank you for making Locked On ACC your first listen and your first watch. Alex Donno and Kenton Gibbs alongside Jackson Holzer from Locked On Syracuse talking about biggest Syracuse recruiting win in at least 24 years, landing five-star receiver Calvin Russell. And I'm not going to be shy about this one, Jackson, because obviously as the Miami guy, seeing Calvin Russell, who not only goes to school at Miami Northwestern, which is down the street, but his mother, Chinevia Broussard, is in the UM Sports Hall of Fame. She played basketball at Miami. So this one hurts. Like, it hurts to see Calvin Russell go elsewhere. I mentioned at the top, like, I wasn't expecting Miami to get the decision on decision day. Ultimately, for whatever reason, Miami didn't get a hat on the table, but it's a hard loss for Miami, and it's a big dub for Syracuse. I mean, were you surprised, Jackson? Because you and I, we've had conversations going back months for Calvin Russell, and even though I wasn't optimistic on Saturday, if you talked to me about it 2 months ago, I would have said, hey, ultimately, I think Miami is going to find a way to get this done. They didn't.
Yeah, I was surprised that Miami didn't even get a hat at the table, because for so long it seemed like it was Syracuse and Miami, and it was this two-horse race, and that it was like every other school involved, it didn't really matter. It was interesting to say the least. I go back to a year ago when I actually spoke to Brian Smith about this. And he said, can't remember if it was on the air or off the air, but regardless, I can share it because it's not like some big deal anyway. But he told me when Miami lost Jeremiah Smith, that was a really tough loss for Miami. And he's like, I don't think they're going to do the same thing with Calvin Russell. I don't think they're going to let Calvin Russell go elsewhere. They're going to make him essentially choose Miami after what happened with Jeremiah Smith. And I'm not going to sit here and say Calvin Russell is on the level of Jeremiah Smith, because Jeremiah Smith is the best receiver commit in maybe ever. I mean, if you go look at his rankings, to be honest with you, he's one of the highest ranking guys literally in the history of the recruiting era. But another five-star receiver from South Florida in Miami's backyard says no to Miami. And they don't even just say no. Doesn't even get a hat on the table. I got to tell you, Donno, you probably know better than I do, but I found that really strange that Miami didn't get more consideration.
Well, there's a weird thing. It's sorry to cut you off, Kenton, but there's a weird thing that sometimes happens with South Florida players. It's like for whatever reason, some guys just want to leave the area. And I think that might be the case with Russell. And this is not me making an excuse because I don't like it, but it happens sometimes. Because you go back, anyone who's watched Locked On Canes, you guys remember, like, right after Calvin Russell made his official visit to Miami in June, I broke down the comments that he made afterwards. And I said, Jackson, it sounded like a 3-star Yelp review. Like, he was very like, yeah, I had a little fun at Miami. It was an okay visit. Like, it wasn't like, because a lot of times whether you like it or not, usually players after an official visit will say, oh, I was blown away. It was incredible. Calvin Russell was like, yeah, I had an okay time there. It's like, did not sound like this young man wanted to be in Miami for whatever reason.
Nope, not at all.
But Donno, I think that's something we need to get into from the Miami angle of things here.
Yeah.
Because we're talking now about 10 stars worth of recruits and 2 guys that are not they're not from the state of Miami. If you know, they're from the city of Miami. They're literally in proximity to Coral Gables that nobody else can match. Are you starting to get a little concerned about Cristobal's ability to recruit specifically the receiver room as well? Because we know what he does in the trenches. That cannot be argued. We know what he does in the portal, but it seems like we're talking about a second time now in a row where Brian Smith acknowledges it as well. Hey, they can't do this again. They can't lose another guy like this. And it's like, actually, they can. actually they did in a way that, like Jackson said, there wasn't even a Miami hat on his table. There are more Miami hats in this podcast than there were on Russell's table right now. So
True.
when you look at that, does that concern you from Miami standpoint?
It doesn't concern me. It annoys me. And I'll tell you why. Like, the reason it doesn't concern me, because if you zoom out, Cristobal and his staff are overall doing an incredible job, but it's like they've made it more national in terms of recruiting. You know, Miami, obviously not just Miami. You compare, you know, recruiting today versus recruiting in the 1980s. Everybody's got access to private jets. Everybody's got access to film from around the country. You know, I mean, Miami does place importance on scouting players in person, but, you know, it's easier to become aware of players. So yeah, I think Cristobal has made Miami's recruiting more national. So it doesn't concern me, because I still think he's doing a bang up job and will continue to do so on the trail. But the trend though and it's wide receiver, it happens more with receivers than it happens at any other position. The trend of top flight receivers, because over the past 20 years, a lot of the top guys from South Florida, they'll go to Alabama, they'll go to Georgia, they'll go to Syracuse now, apparently. A lot of them go to Ohio State. That's been a thing for a while now. Miami seems to lose more receivers from the area. So it's like, I don't necessarily know how you fix it, because you can't force players to stay home. You convince them. Like, it was a big decision when Ruben Bain decided to stay in South Florida. You know, Miami did keep a receiver in the area last year, Malachi Toney, who had been, you know, committed elsewhere for a while. They convinced Malachi to stay home, which was big. But it's annoying, Kenton, because like I can't like say like, oh, Cristobal's lost his recruiting touch, because clearly he hasn't. I mean, he got, you know, Vance Spafford is one of the top receivers in California, who left California to come to Miami. So it's like, but I do want to win more of these local battles, though, the long and the short of it, because, you know, you've got schools like Miami Northwestern, and ironically, the head coach of Miami Northwestern is Teddy Bridgewater, who was a South Florida kid who left to go play his college ball at Louisville. So maybe he tells his players, you don't have to stay home at Miami. So it's a little ironic there. But yeah, I mean, Northwestern is an important pipeline. Miami Central, an important pipeline. You know, Chaminade Madonna, where Jeremiah Smith went, and Miami has gotten some players from there, has become an important pipeline. You always hate to lose kids from those schools. I'm not going to say this is a big indictment on Mario Cristobal, but it is something that annoys me frequently. It doesn't concern me, but it annoys me.
And Donno, I can build off that point, because I actually understand exactly how you feel. And I'll tell you why. About a month before Calvin Russell committed, I was annoyed on the Syracuse podcast that I was doing. And I don't know if you all are aware of this, but the number one recruit in New York is also a wide receiver, Messiah Hampton.
Yep.
Messiah Hampton's from Rochester. That's not far from Syracuse at all. That's a couple hours. That's it. This is a hometown guy that you got right here, a 4-star wide receiver, consensus 4-star receiver, I might add. One of the better wide receiver prospects in the country. And Syracuse did not win that recruiting battle. They finished in second place, but second place gets you what? Nothing. It gets you nothing, right? Where did he go? Oregon. He went to the Pacific Northwest, far from home, because he trusted the former Syracuse wide receiver coach, Ross Douglas, who went to Oregon this offseason. So I get it, but at the same time, I'm starting to think that, you know what? I don't know if proximity really matters as much as it used to with these recruits. Maybe for some it does. They want to stay closer to home. I totally get that. And there's great schools probably close to wherever they are located for the most part, especially if you're in the Southeast. There's plenty of schools to choose from that are close by, even if you're up north. I mean, you got Penn State in the area, Syracuse, obviously. You want to go a little bit more west. You got Ohio State. You got Michigan over there as well. Like, you got big time programs, but the point is that I don't know how much proximity really matters this much. I think it's more about how you can build relationships. And then, of course, there's also the NIL factor that matters.
Well,
hold on.
Go ahead. Go ahead, Dom.
Well, I wanted to, because I teased it before. I want to make sure we get into the basketball angle here of Calvin Russell. Like, it's been one of those things where it's hard to do both. Like there's a reason why, Clemson just converted a basketball player into tight end. He's not going to play both sports. He's switching to football. Like it's hard because there's a couple months of overlap, but it's something Russell is very serious about. He wants to play both basketball and football, had offers from both sports, from Miami and Michigan and from Syracuse, where he has pledged to play. Are we full speed ahead on that, Jackson? And how much do you expect him to help the basketball team?
I gotta admit, I gotta do more research on it. Him as a basketball player, he's definitely more known as a football player, if we're being honest. I mean, you go look at all the recruiting rankings, you don't really see much basketball for him. You see mostly football. And I'm struggling to figure out where exactly he ranks as a basketball recruit. Like if he was solely a basketball player, what type of offers would he be getting? Because I know he got a Syracuse basketball offer and he's going to play for the Syracuse basketball team. I know that he got the Miami offer, he got the Michigan offer. And on the surface, if you get offers for basketball to play for Syracuse, Miami, or Michigan, you're probably a pretty good basketball player. But how much is that influence solely because he wants to play basketball in college a little, and they're saying, you know what, we want to get this guy so badly as a football player that we're fine if he's the 15th guy on the roster, or maybe he's actually legitimately a really excellent basketball player who can help the basketball team as well. And I had also someone asking me about, can you actually feasibly play two sports? The answer is yeah, you can. I mean, yes, there is an overlap, but when there is an overlap, you prioritize football.
Right.
You prioritize football when there's an overlap, and when the football season ends, you still got a couple of months of basketball season. Basketball is also played on Tuesdays and on Wednesdays and not during a game week for football. I think it's feasible. I think you could certainly do it. It's been done at the highest of pro levels out there. So if the highest of pro levels can do it, it could be done at the college level as well. I'm just trying to figure out how good is he exactly at basketball? Is he a guy who's just there? He's going to be the 15th guy, or is this someone who in 2026, I'm saying, hey, Calvin Russell's a legitimate rotation piece for Syracuse? I really don't know.
Hey, I've got to step in and stop you here. It was done at the highest level professionally decades ago. It hasn't even been done in college at the highest level for a reason.
Yeah. The point is that there's precedent out there.
Hypothetically, yes. Hypothetically. And here's the thing. Travis Hunter proved us all wrong about playing both sides of the ball. So hypothetically, Mr. Russell could show us, hey, I'm the sixth man off the bench, and I'm the first guy off the bench for Syracuse basketball, and I'm a dynamic wide receiver. I just think it'll be much more of that DeAndre Hopkins, he played on the basketball team type of deal. I think
someone brought to my attention Keon Coleman at Florida State, I think.
Yeah. He played on the basketball team at Michigan State.
Like that.
Yeah, he played on the basketball team at Michigan State. And again, he was the 15th guy off the bench, where it was like, yes, I exist in this space. He was not like, Izzo was not serious, like, oh, yeah, this guy, he's going to be a serious contributor. So I could see that situation where he's on the team. But just from a physical demand standpoint, what is called for in both basketball and football now is very different from when offenses were, hey, stand around, dump it down in the post. Maybe we get a little bit of motion going. Maybe somebody gets open beyond the three because they're doubling our big, and we work it out that way. It's a very different game in terms of pace and space now for basketball to then say, oh, and I'm going to play football at the same time.
Well, I will add, it was going to be easy. I didn't say it was going to be easy. I just was like, people have played two sports. I mean, it's not unheard of for someone to play two sports. But again, it goes back to what I've been saying, which is I don't know how good of a basketball player he actually is. Clearly, there is some level of baseline here. Clearly, he's not a complete scrub, because you could say how much you want to play basketball all you want, but if the coaches are going to say you're not even close, you're not even remotely a possibility to play D1 basketball, they would not give him an offer, even if it meant they can get him on the football team. So there's something there, but let's just say this. I think it's far more likely that Calvin Russell plays in the NFL than he does in the NBA.
That is well said. And we'll leave it at that. Excellent job as always from Jackson Holzer, Locked On Syracuse. And this is big for you, Jackson, to get a player like this. And I know you've been making the most of it. So make sure you guys all check out Locked On Syracuse, where Jackson has been breaking down this massive commitment from Calvin Russell. Thank you so much, my friend. We'll talk to you again soon.
All right, take care, guys. See you soon.
All right, so Kenton, my interest is peaked when I start to see Super League in the headlines again. Maybe that's the ace in the hole that Florida State and Clemson have right now when it came to signing this settlement. You want to keep it locked right here. We're not done yet on Locked On ACC. So this was some good reporting by Matt Baker, who is now with The Athletic. All right, so as people are starting to parse the language in the settlement, right? The settlement that Clemson and Florida State signed with the ACC to finally put those lawsuits to bed, right? All right, so Florida State and Clemson. This is I'm reading this from Saturday Down South. They could leave the ACC behind in football, join or form a super league, and owe the ACC only a fraction of the exit fee it would otherwise have to pay. However feasible an actual college football super league might be is beside the point, according to a report from The Athletic's Matt Baker. The settlement the ACC and its two disgruntled schools agreed to earlier this year may have created an exit ramp to a football-only Conference of Champions. All right, let's see the language in here. Officially called an option of limited withdrawal, it's the juiciest part of the agreement and new information, regardless of whether it's feasible. Suppose at least 6 members want to leave the same sport to join a single sport league, conference, or other association alongside other schools. In that case, they'll owe $75 million or 50% of the current withdrawal figure. In practice, that would allow, say, Florida State, Clemson, Miami, North Carolina, and a few other top programs to leave for a super league in football while remaining ACC members in basketball, baseball, and every other sport. Now, Kenton, the fact that this language is even in that settlement, that at least makes me feel like Clemson and Florida State felt as though there is at least an above 0% chance that a super league could happen in the future. It's been talked about. Private equity money, you create just a football super league that becomes, the new preeminent college football conference. Like, hearing that tells me there's a chance this could be a reality someday.
Donno, I've got to get to law school. I have got to get to law school because them folks charge the ACC all that money to leave every single door in the house open and then say, oh my God, there's a bear in the house. What is this? What is happening? I am genuinely confused. What did the ACC get? I am so like, okay. So now you don't even need the majority of teams. You don't even need half of the teams. You don't even need half of the original teams before the expansion out west to SMU, Cal, and Stanford. You don't even need half of those teams to say, hey, we're actually going to go for there to be a severe reduction in the buyout here. Now, the Super League aspect of this is very interesting because you're right. It does mean that there's a non-zero chance. I'm interested in this from the ACC standpoint in terms of what did y'all do with the lawsuit. But speaking on the Super League aspect of it, I think that would be a very interesting concept to see because what teams would be invited in? What would be the criteria? Would it be your winning percentage in conference? Would it be recent conference championships? Because if that's the case, now you end up in a very wonky situation where who's eligible to enter the Conference of Champions? At that point, it would be what? Florida State, Clemson, who else? Pitt, Wake Forest, and I guess Notre Dame would be in there since they won one for us recently. But that's it. If you're going by winning percentage in conference, you come up with a different results than those. And it's just a very interesting thing here to see. What does this Super League scenario look like in terms of who gets invited and who's stuck holding the bag? Like, oh, I guess we're still ACC football teams.
Okay, well, my understanding on the way the Super League would work, and of course they would theoretically, cherry pick high-profile programs from the top conferences, the top brands to form, like a 60-team, 75-team, 80 team, where you don't worry as much about losing one game and costing you a champion because it's the best versus the best. But my understanding is, Kenton, the criteria to join the Super League, think of the Super League as capitalism on steroids. right? Like, don't tell me about, oh, Pitt won an ACC championship a few years ago. Like, the only thing the Super League is going to look at is what kind of television draw are you going to be for us? How much money? Like, they're not going to say, hey, you know, Wake Forest, you had a pretty decent season like 5 years ago under Dave Clawson. They're not getting a Super League invite. Pitt is not getting a Super League invite. You know, Miami has never won the ACC in 21 years, but they would probably get a Super League invite because, you know,
I'm trying to make it fair, y'all. I'm trying to make it fair. I'm trying to make it a meritocracy based on who won the games.
You're trying to make it fair. They're trying to make some money.
Hey, you're not wrong. And here's the sickest part about it. You're not wrong. And anybody who knows me knows that, like, I intentionally avoided the money angle for a reason because I'm a big fan of lining up. But at the end of the day, sometimes lining the pockets is what really matters. They don't give a damn about lining up at the 50. They care about lining them pockets for 50 years. So.
Well, here's another one. Like, you know, I know, like, Texas A&M has been super hot on the recruiting trail in recent years, but, like, what if they actually won? Like, they haven't won anything, but they would be in the Super League. So by your argument, Pittsburgh would have more of an argument to be in the Super League than Texas A&M. A&M's getting in. Pittsburgh is not.
Well, I thought you were talking League of Champions, baby. I thought we were talking, you know, Premier League type stuff over here. Like, oh, you win your deal. You know, you win your deal. You do your little digital renewal. We put you in the Premier League of college football. But I get it. I understand. It's about the money. It's about, you know, Texas A&M. They're one of the biggest draws in the country, regardless of if they're a 12-win team or an 8-win team. And I understand that aspect of it. So, you know, this Super League, you're absolutely right. It's going to be dictated by ratings and viewership. But for my personal gratification, I would like to see just a smidgen of, hey, you need to show us some recent success if you want to get in here. Because, I mean, again, I understand the thought of we're doing what's best for the money. At some point in time, all that damn money that Texas A&M has spent, what is there to show for it? All of the money in the world that's spent. All the people talk about Ohio State's roster, how much it costs. How much do you think A&M's cost? How much do you think they got Nolan from Ole Miss from? How much do you think they got these players for? And you're just like, oh, no, it doesn't matter. They'll be good enough. They'll be close enough. Yeah. It's hogwash.
Oh, man. Well, let's see. We want to make sure, Kenton, that we say nice things about Super League because if in a couple years, if there's a Locked On Super League, you and I need to have our names into that hat. Like we're
yeah, Spencer, you keep Locked On College Football. We'll do Locked On Super League. Me and Donno, we'll do Locked On Super League.
You can talk about all the loser teams that don't get Super League invites. We're hosting Locked On Super League. You can do your show on Wake Forest. We'll do our show on Super League.
Hey, listen, I am not above capitalism either, okay? Y'all pay me the right amount. I'll be sitting right there telling you why Rocket Money is sponsoring this year's Super League playoff.
I love it. Well, good times as always. Thanks to Jackson Holzer for joining us. Make sure you check out Kenton Gibbs and Grayson Boone on Locked On Wolfpack. Kenton, of course, former NC State defensive lineman. He and Grayson do an awesome job covering all things NC State. I cover all things Miami on Locked On Canes. Follow me at Alex Donno. Follow Kenton at TGIF_Kenton. And we'll talk to you next time on another episode of Locked On ACC. We are part of the awesome Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.